Good afternoon. My name is Bob Bruner. I am the Purdue A&R Extension Educator for Clay and Owen counties, and this is the second episode in my series, The Truth About Bugs. Our first episode, we talked about murder hornets and what that could potentially mean for our country. Today, we are going to be covering an insect that we are all very familiar with, as much as we wish we weren't, known as the mosquito. We have many species of mosquitoes throughout the United States. Some of them are more troublesome to us than others. I'm not going to be talking about any individual species. I'm just going to be giving you today an idea of how they live, what they do, and some ideas on what you can do to try to protect yourself against mosquitoes. I know we all dislike getting so bit up every summer here in Indiana, and I'm hoping what you learned today will help you prepare just a little bit better as summer gets more and more prevalent in our lives. So the mosquito that I'm showing you right now is known as Aedes albopictus, the tiger mosquito, and this is a common one throughout our state. This guy will start coming out any time now, especially after the rains, when there's plenty of standing water around and eggs will begin to hatch out. You'll typically see them buzzing around right around the crepuscular times of day where it's warmer, namely right around sundown is when they're going to get really bad, and you'll just get bitten up all over the place. Now, mosquitoes actually have a little bit more different lifestyle than other insects that we may talk about in this series, and I just wanted to share some of that lifestyle with you, and it'll help you understand some of the ways that you can use their life cycle to protect yourself. So when we ask how do they live, we want to begin at the start, of course, and they begin life as an egg in an egg raft. These are aquatic insects for the first part of their lives. They are going to remain in the water until they become an adult. And when they do so, they will hatch out of their pupa or their cocoon or chrysalis directly out of the water. Now, most people believe that all insects eat or consume is blood, and that's actually not true. Mosquitoes can consume nectar, sap, and blood. Now, only female mosquitoes will consume blood, and only when they're preparing to lay eggs. So that means that she will have to have mated, and then she will seek out a blood meal in order to lay those eggs. Otherwise, they're actually going after flowers and other sap-producing sources where they can get sugar for energy. Now, as I said, we'll start at the beginning, and I talked a little bit about this already. This is a close-up image of a mosquito egg raft. What will happen is a female will lay this egg raft directly on the water, and when it's time to hatch, the little mosquito larva will hatch out of the bottom and begin to swim right in the uppermost portion of the water, right where the water-air interface is. This is a very close-up image. Most of the time, if you saw this on water, you may think of it as plant debris, or little pieces of dirt that could be floating on the surface. But if you get up close or use a microscope, you will actually very clearly be able to see all these little conical shapes. And sometimes you may not even need aid in seeing them like this. Sometimes all you have to do is get just a little bit closer to tell. And that makes monitoring for them fairly easy. You just have to look at the surface of the water and see what's there. When they hatch out, they will have aquatic larvae. Sometimes these are referred to by wigglers, especially by fishermen. These are filter feeding insects. They don't hunt prey. They don't eat plant material. They filter out planktonic organisms out of the water, and that will act as their food source. That big shape you see at the end of their tail is an air horn. What they do is they poke that through the surface of the water, and they'll actually breathe atmospheric oxygen, just like we will. Mosquitoes are very good at surviving. They don't require very clean water sources to be able to live. In fact, they probably favor water sources that are a little bit more dirty, a little bit more eutrophic, with lots of nutrients and microorganisms in them for them to consume. And usually they're an indication that a water source may not be as pristine as you would like it to be. Once the larvae continue to develop, they will eventually pupate, just like a butterfly would. But in this case, as opposed to having a cocoon, they'll have this funny shape that are often referred to as tumblers. Also, unlike butterfly cocoons, these shapes are actually still able to move. That tail is what we refer to as motile. It's still able to move around and they can swim to try to escape predators. The aquatic pupa will also have air horns attached to its kind of back that'll poke out of the water as well. Once the insect is finished developing inside of its pupa, this shape will split open on the back and the adult insect will fly directly from the air-water interface and into the air, and it's going to seek out food and a mate as soon as it becomes an adult. Now, why do we hate mosquitoes? Well, by far, out of just about any organism on Earth, mosquitoes are the biggest killer of human beings. They are responsible for many, many diseases. Some of the big ones are malaria. We're familiar with West Nile virus here in Indiana, and the list just goes on and on. I honestly couldn't fit them all onto one slide if I tried. Now, one thing I can tell you is that current research does not show that COVID-19 is spread by a mosquito. Let me repeat that. COVID-19, as far as scientists are able to tell, is not spread by a mosquito, and they believe that most likely that will never happen. Differences in the way the disease virus works in the mosquito's body will most likely make that impossible. So for the time being, that is not something you have to be concerned about. However, that doesn't mean I don't mean to downplay the severity of the other diseases mosquitoes can spread. We are blessed here in Indiana in that they only spread one major disease, the West Nile virus, as far as we're aware of. Mainly, we just dislike mosquitoes because they make going outside so unpleasant at certain times of the year. So of course, you're going to want to know, how can you protect yourself against mosquitoes? Well, the first thing to do is to look at preventing them from ever being there at all. Now, I mentioned before, all these mosquitoes breed using water sources. If there are no standing water sources nearby, you're going to find that you have fewer mosquitoes than a neighbor who does have something like a pond or a frog pond or a rain barrel. Try to eliminate those standing water sources if you did not intentionally put them there. Clean up any debris that could cause flooding. If you have a gutter where there is debris causing water to pool at the base of the gutter as the water flows outwards, clean that up, fix that pool, make sure that it can't happen. Any standing water source will work. Remember, they don't need clean, pristine water, they just need water, period. For those water sources you have that are intentional, monitor them. Take a net, kind of scoop over the top of the water and look for the egg grafts, see if they're present there. If you begin to find egg grafts, you know that you're going to have mosquitoes. And you can always just get rid of those depending on how big your water source is to begin with. If you take egg grafts out of water and just throw them in the trash, you're not going to have a problem with mosquitoes. Now, protecting yourself against mosquitoes can be somewhat more difficult. The most common form of protection that we employ currently is a form of repellent. And the most common repellent used is DEET, a particular chemical that's known to interfere with a female's ability to find her food source, namely us. DEET is by far the most effective. It is known to provide about 8 hours of protection against mosquitoes when it is applied to skin and clothing. Now, I've seen a lot of different mixtures of natural products, essential oils, lemongrass, the list goes on. And many of them can provide protection. But the problem is this: they don't have nearly the duration that you would get out of one application of DEET to skin or clothing. So you'll have to keep repeating, putting it on over and over again. And I would strongly suggest that if you're going to use something that is primarily essential oils, you may want to check to see if it legitimately can protect you against mosquitoes. There are a lot of products out there, and unfortunately, some of them just are not as good as others. And unfortunately, the producers of those products may not necessarily say how effective they are. Another option are what is known as mosquito control devices. This can be something like a bug zapper or a sonic device. Now, bug zappers can be effective in protecting against mosquitoes, especially combined with some kind of attractant. However, they're not going to prevent other insects from coming as well. I'm sure a lot of us have seen bug zappers at work at night, and they're zapping moths and beetles and all kinds of things. And they may be getting mosquitoes as well, but you're seeing that they're getting kind of everything. I usually don't recommend bug zappers for mosquito control because you stand just as good a chance of harming insects that you may want to have around, such as predators, and maybe not getting as many mosquitoes as you would like. So that's not to say don't use them, just keep in mind that this is what's going to result when you do. Now, as for sonic devices, these can be things that are said to mimic the high-pitched noise of a predator like a bat or maybe a mosquito of the opposite sex. These have never been shown to be effective. There are some indications that maybe ultrasonic devices might prove effective, but so far research indicates that this is simply not the case. So I would avoid sonic devices. They are just a waste of your money. Now, for those of you who live in a city like me, pesticide applications are something you may see during the summer. Normally, as the summer gets rolling through June and July, I will see a city truck outside that's equipped with a sprayer that is fogging for mosquitoes. These are able to do so because when they choose to make their applications, there are no other insects normally flying that are of major concern. So they may not necessarily be hitting bees that are out foraging or something like that. You just have to keep in mind that the pesticides that get applied will have what's called a residual. That means the time that that ingredient is active. And you're going to want to watch that residual to make sure that it will become inactive before any sensitive species occur. The other thing with pesticide applications is simply that you can't fog for mosquitoes without having a particular license in the state of Indiana. So if you see something that is advertising spray this to kill mosquitoes, double check its label. Make sure it is something that you can legally apply. And unless you are licensed, you will never be using something like a sprayer on the back of a truck like the city services or your county services may be using. I would also like to add to this, and this is something I should have mentioned a little earlier, is that you'll often see people using citronella candles. These can provide protection as just like the other repellents that I mentioned before. It's just that protection may not be as effective or as long lasting as what you would get out of an application of these. And you would also have to make sure that you are getting area coverage. And that's going to count for any of these types of protection is the area coverage. If you are putting some kind of gas into the air, even the smell of citronella, you have to make sure that the coverage is good enough that it's going to interfere with the mosquito's ability to find you. Now, I know that this summer is going to be a very unusual one, especially with the COVID-19 outbreak. So it's always good to look for new ways to protect yourself from all kinds of things that either irritate us or represent a potential health threat. Remember, when you look for those things, look it up, research it, contact your county extension educator and get information from them. We want to make sure that what you're doing is going to be safe and effective for you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this episode with some photo credits from the various entomologists who collected those images and my contact information. Please feel free to contact me anytime with any questions, whether it's about bugs or any other thing that's on your mind. Thank you, and I will see you guys next week with some words on stink bugs.